Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today. Recent meetings between some big names in tech and former President Trump. We've got a whole bunch of news articles to dig through. And, as tech enthusiasts, I'm sure you can see why this is so interesting. These are the folks who really shaped the tech we use every day, the online services we depend on. Heck, even the economy feels the impact. So the big question, is this just a few friendly dinners, or are we witnessing something bigger, a real shift in the tech world?
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. The first thing that really jumped out at me, Apple CEO Tim Cook had dinner with Trump at Mar-a-Lago just last Friday, December 14th. It's their first time meeting in person since a phone call a couple months back. So that right there made me think, there's got to be more to this story.
The timing is definitely interesting, for sure. I mean, we've seen a lot of tech leaders seemingly getting closer to Trump lately, and it's all happening right as he's gearing up for a potential second term. Makes you wonder what's on their minds, doesn't it?
It does. And it's not just Cook either. Remember back in mid-October, Trump was on that Patrick Bet-David show. He mentioned that Cook called him directly about that huge $15 billion fine the EU slapped on Apple.
Right, relating to antitrust issues. And that's just one example. There are other tech giants kind of aligning themselves with Trump these days. OpenAI's Sam Altman, for instance, just donated a cool $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund.
Whoa, that's a pretty bold move. What's the logic there, do we know?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's pretty safe to assume these tech leaders know a second Trump term could really impact their businesses. They're probably trying to get a head start, build some relationships, and maybe even have a say in policies that could hit their industries.
Policies like what? Give us some examples.
Well, Section 230 reform is a big one. That's the law that protects tech platforms from lawsuits over what users post, Trump's been pretty vocal against Section 230, so some companies might be trying to influence how it gets changed. Then there's the whole antitrust debate. Could some companies be hoping to avoid scrutiny under a Trump administration, maybe even gain an advantage over their rivals? These are all possibilities we're thinking about.
It's fascinating stuff. And you've got Amazon planning to donate $1 million to the inauguration.
Yeah.
Andy streamed the whole thing on Prime Video. And we're talking about Amazon, founded by Jeff Bezos, who also owns the Washington Post, which hasn't exactly been kind to Trump, let's say.
That's putting it mildly. Makes you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes, right? And remember, Trump mentioned he's meeting with Bezos soon, given their history. That's a meeting I'd love to be a fly on the wall for.
Totally. It's like everyone's trying to figure out where they stand in this potential new tech world under a second Trump term. And then, just a few weeks back, Mark Zuckerberg visited Mar-a-Lago. Shortly after Meta, formerly Facebook, they donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, too. Are we seeing a pattern here?
It's definitely raising some eyebrows. And remember, Cook, like a lot of tech leaders, publicly congratulated Trump on winning the election last month, beating Kamala Harris. He even made a post on X about it.
Let me guess something about working together to build a brighter future.
Pretty much. He wrote, "We look forward to working with you and your administration to help ensure that America continues to be led and fueled by ingenuity, innovation, and creativity." Very diplomatic, very carefully worded.
So what's your take on all of this? Are these tech giants really optimistic about a Trump presidency, or is it more about self-preservation? Making sure they're on the right side of power?
It's probably a mix of both, wouldn't you say? I mean, no CEO wants to be on the bad side of a powerful administration, right? They've got their companies to think about their shareholders, their own interests. But some of them might genuinely believe that a Trump presidency could be good for business.
Right. Less regulation, more freedom to innovate, maybe even help breaking into new markets. But wouldn't that come with a cost?
Potentially, for sure. There are always trade-offs.
Right? Let's talk about those trade-offs.
Exactly. Less regulation.
Yeah.
Might sound good at first, but it could also lead to a race to the bottom, where companies just focus on profits and forget about stuff like user privacy and data security. And that's something you as a consumer should definitely be thinking about.
It's a slippery slope, no doubt.
Yeah.
And what about the global impact? I mean, these are huge companies with reach all over the world. Could these alliances with Trump change international trade deals? Maybe even give certain companies an edge in foreign markets?
That's a really important point. Think about those trade wars we saw during Trump's first term. Imagine the kind of power a close relationship with the U.S. president could give these companies when they're negotiating trade deals. It could completely change the game, especially for those looking to expand into new markets.
So it's not just about what happens here in the U.S. It could affect the entire tech industry worldwide.
Exactly. And it goes beyond trade deals, too. There are concerns about data privacy, content moderation, the potential for these platforms to be used for political manipulation. A Trump administration might be more hands-off when it comes to regulating these things, and that could have huge consequences for how these companies operate globally.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it?
Mm.
And it raises some pretty big questions. Are these tech leaders really on board with Trump's vision for tech, or are they just playing the game to protect their own interests?
That's a tough one. It's probably something each company, each CEO is wrestling with right now. They're weighing the pros and cons, being in Trump's good graces versus potentially alienating customers, employees, even investors who maybe don't share Trump's view.
Right, because let's be real, Trump is a polarizing figure. Getting too close to him could backfire, especially in an industry that's already under so much scrutiny.
Yeah, there's a fine line between building strategic relationships and looking like you're endorsing someone who can be very divisive. These companies need to be really careful how they handle this.
So what should we as consumers and citizens be watching for? What are the signs that these alliances might be going too far?
That's a great question. I think one thing to look out for is any indication that these companies are using their platforms to shut down opposing views or push a specific political agenda. We need to be really vigilant about protecting free speech, making sure these platforms stay open to different perspectives. Another red flag would be any attempts to weaken privacy protections or give the government more access to our personal data. These are things that affect all of us, and we need to make our voices heard.
It sounds like these alliances, while maybe good for the companies involved, could also be risky for the rest of us.
That's the bottom line, right? We need to have a public conversation about the role of tech in society and what these power dynamics really mean.
And that conversation needs to happen now before these alliances get too strong and it's too late to change course.
I agree completely. This is a crucial moment. We're at a crossroads. The decisions these companies make now will have a huge impact on the future of tech and on society as a whole.
So to bring it back to you, our listener, pay attention. Keep your eyes on how these tech giants are interacting with the political world. Are they using their influence responsibly? Are they looking out for your interests or putting profits above everything else? These are questions worth asking as we navigate this complex and constantly changing landscape.
The future isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it, the choices we make today, the conversations we have, the actions we take. All of that will determine what kind of world we live in.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, it really is a lot to think about. And I'm sure our listeners are wondering, what does this all mean for me?
Well, here's the thing. These companies are the ones building the technology that's shaping our lives, right? I mean, from how we communicate, how we get information, to how we workshop, even think. And the choices they make, these alliances they're forming, it all has a direct impact on how that technology is developed and used.
So this isn't just some political game happening in a bubble. This has real consequences for all of us. Exactly. Think about those algorithms that decide what you see on your social media feeds or the AI systems. Being used in everything from healthcare to job applications. The values built into that tech, the biases it might have, they can have a huge impact on our lives and on society as a whole.
And if these companies are getting too close to a certain political viewpoint, could that end up influencing those values, those biases?
That's a valid concern. It's something we as consumers and citizens need to be aware of. We have to ask the tough questions about who's shaping this technology and what their agenda is.
So what can we do? Do we just sit back and watch as these tech giants and political heavyweights make deals that could change the world?
No way. We have a voice and we need to use it. Support groups that are fighting for digital rights and privacy. Hold these companies responsible for their choices. Demand transparency. And most importantly, be part of the conversation. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues. The more awareness we raise, the more pressure we can put on them.
It's all about making sure technology serves us, not the other way around.
Exactly. It's a fight we all need to be a part of.
Well, we've covered a lot today, from those dinners at Mar-a-Lago to how these tech-Trump alliances could reshape the world. It's pretty clear we're heading into a new era in the relationship between tech and politics, and it's one that needs our attention, our critical thinking, and our active participation.
Remember, the future isn't set in stone. We have the power to shape it. The choices we make today, the conversations we have, the actions we take, all of that will determine what kind of world we create.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and stay curious. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.